This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
Forgiving yourself when you can't be perfectly in control. Like, the idea of controlling how you act can lead to this feedback loop of anxiety, like, what am I going to do, what am I going to do, what am I going to do? Whereas if you allow yourself to be emotional and don't judge yourself so much, you'll actually, I find at least, that those highs and lows kind of can balance out. If it's not perfect, I'm still like dramatic, emotional, all of those things.
Hello and welcome back to You're Gonna Want to Hear This, the podcast where ordinary women share extraordinary stories. I'm your host, Georgie McCourt, the editor of Marie Claire. Okay, before I was diagnosed with PMDD, and if you're wondering what that stands for, it stands for Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. I genuinely thought I was losing my mind. For 2 weeks every month, I became someone that I barely recognized. Irrationally angry, overwhelmed, emotional, exhausted. And then my period would arrive and it would all disappear, leaving me wondering how I had spiraled so far and so fast. For years, I thought that I was alone in that experience. And then I read Emma Hardy's extraordinary new memoir, Periodic Bitch. Great title. It is a memoir of menstruation, madness, and monsters. The book explores what happens when your own brain becomes something that you don't entirely trust. And trust me, that can be pretty scary. Every 29 days, Emma finds herself battling rage and despair, intrusive thoughts, and emotional chaos. And when she's finally diagnosed with PMDD, she begins a much bigger investigation into female illness and hysteria, rage, relationships, and also the stories that we've been telling women about their bodies for centuries. What I love most about this book is that it is brutally honest. Emma writes about the parts many women are ashamed to admit. The anger, resentment, the fear, and the moments when you don't recognize yourself. But she also asks the bigger questions like, when is a mood just a mood? When does it become an illness? And also, why are women's experiences so often misunderstood or just dismissed? Whether you've experienced PMDD yourself, someone you love has, or if you've ever wondered why women's pain is still so poorly understood, I think you're going to find this conversation incredibly validating. Let's meet Emma Hardy. Emma, welcome. Welcome to You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I am excited as well because, as we said before we started recording, I have my own personal journey with PMDD. But before we start, because I do want to dive straight in, but I realise you have written a whole book about PMDD, but I want to explain to our listeners exactly what it is before we dive in.
So PMDD, the way I describe it in like every person's language, is like extreme PMS. It's a mood disorder that takes place before your period. So that's in the 10 days, 1 week, 2 weeks before you actually menstruate. And its symptoms are like severe irritability, depression, conflict in relationships, even suicidal ideation. The reality is it's not actually PMS. It is a neurological disorder where basically your body has normal hormonal levels, but your brain's neurosteroids are responding badly to them. So you can think of it like an allergic reaction at the conversion level. They're still figuring a lot out about it, but that's what PMDD is.
So, how long did it take you to be diagnosed with PMDD?
Well, I was diagnosed very quickly. I was diagnosed by a man at a bulk billing clinic who saw me for 15 minutes. But I was skeptical of that diagnosis. It seemed like I'd come in upset. He wrote that I had a childlike affect, and I didn't quite believe that I was upset just because of my period. It just seemed really misogynistic to me. Um, and then when Melbourne's lockdowns happened, was that true? I guess like it resonated with me. Sorry, it seemed really misogynistic to me. It did resonate with me. And then when Melbourne's lockdown happened, I was like, I need to investigate this properly. And I went through a 3-month kind of tracking my symptoms every day and getting a proper diagnosis. And it was right.
I'll start with my symptoms. So, I was probably diagnosed maybe, 4 years ago. And as I said before we started recording, I went on antidepressants maybe 2 years ago, I was so resistant to
Mm.
take medication because I wasn't depressed. I'm not depressed. And it felt like a huge failure taking antidepressants when I wasn't depressed. And I just thought, I don't need medication. But I had this extreme PMS where I would feel so angry and so irritable and emotional, and things would spiral for
Mm.
2 weeks of the month. And it's so debilitating because then I would start to dread not
Yeah.
just 3 days before my period, 2 weeks before my period,
And then the 1 week after your period when you're just trying to get everything back on track as
and all
well.
the things like,
You're trying to catch up, like you spend your good days catching up and making up for your bad days. And I get the like not wanting to be on antidepressants because my thing was like, why would I take something all the time for something that is only affecting me some of the time? Like you want your treatment to match your illness, which isn't necessarily possible.
well, I was told by a lot of doctors, why don't you take antidepressants for 2 weeks out of the month?
Mm.
But then I thought that didn't sound right either because then maybe I'd come up and down.
Yeah,
So for me, just a low dose of sertraline has completely
that's awesome.
transformed my life. Like
That's awesome.
I also don't get my period anymore because I have a marina. Um, but it has. But before this, before I was
Yeah.
diagnosed having PMDD, I would do things like, in an argument with my ex-husband, smash a glass
Hmm.
or just cry the whole time. Like
Hmm.
I was so emotional and I felt so out of control for things would tip me over the edge. And it was so debilitating. So that was me. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Talk to me about who you were before you got the diagnosis.
Oh, yeah. So before I got the diagnosis, I think it's funny you talk about it um, in terms of like focusing on this supreme irritation because like that is so true. And I really felt that. But I think when I think of myself pre-diagnosis, I think about the fact that I was kind of oblivious to it. So I'd go through these like huge mood swings. I would like go camping with friends and they would all go for a walk and I would just like go sit by myself and like throw my body into the ocean and just like be acting really erratically. Um, and then I would just forget about it and I would just go about my life and be like, well, that never happened, and just completely oblivious, completely ignoring it. Um, and you can't really do that when you're in a relationship with somebody who then can say, no, you were acting like really badly. Like you were behaving badly. You were crying all night. Like I can't pretend that you weren't spending all of last night just like sobbing and go back to normal. We need to talk about this or address this. But yeah, a lot of crying, a lot of anger. I relate to I don't think I have smashed a glass, not for lack of wanting to, but like that
I
kind of anger that
also,
like,
like, the pressure of having children also made things even more intense.
well, yeah, I don't have kids, but this has been one of the things that I've been really anxious about with thinking about having kids is like, what would that do to me and what would I reflect to them? As well as just thinking about what would happen with postnatal depression since they're similar hormones. It's terrifying. And a part of the one thing that I explored in the book was also women who have done bad things while they're PMSing and the way that our culture responds to that as well. Like we don't think of women as being violent, but like if you have an illness like PMDD, you see that you don't want to be violent, but you are completely capable of violence and that kind of anger. Um, and if we ignore that, then we don't address that either.
There is a line where you write, "I cannot tell whether what I feel is real or whether I am being driven crazy."
Mm.
Tell me how much PMDD distorts not only your emotions, but just your trust in your own mind.
Mm. For me, it felt like, and I don't know if you relate to this, I felt like I just supremely couldn't trust myself. So I had a lot of suicidal ideation when I have PMDD. Um, and I became really, really afraid that I would hurt myself. And the way I was thinking about that was almost like I wasn't myself when I had PMDD. And so this monster that had taken over my body was going to hurt me. And me, my normal happy self, was some other version of me that was just being harmed by this. Um, and so I think part of writing this book was also trying not to have such disparate identities because I don't think that was helpful in terms of actually having to live with this illness, and instead trying to stitch myself an identity where I'm not so scared of being out of control, and I also trust myself not to actually hurt myself, which is a lot of sitting with discomfort, a lot of really like hard work. but yeah, necessary if you have PMDD. You have to be able to live with yourself.
And that emotional resilience and that emotional regulation and
Oh, yeah.
controlling how you react and not spiraling. Then
But
it's
also
just,
forgiving yourself when you can't be perfectly in control. Like the idea of controlling how you act can lead to this feedback loop of anxiety, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Whereas if you allow yourself to be emotional and don't judge yourself so much, you'll actually, I find at least, that those highs and lows kind of can balance out a bit. It's not perfect. I'm still like dramatic, emotional, all of those things. Um, and I will still cry when I have PMDD. No matter what treatment I am on, it seems. But that trust in myself really alleviates that just low level anxiety that makes it worse.
there's a moment in your memoir when Pavan, your boyfriend, tells you no one else would be able to love you. And I read that and I was like, oh. And you write about relationships with such honesty, talk about the guilt and the fear and also the rage. How difficult was it to interrogate intimacy so publicly?
I think Pavan and I have this idea of our relationship, which is that if we are going to treat each other a certain way, it would only be worse to hide that. Like if we were being mean to each other and then trying to hide it, um, that's a whole other level of it being sinister. I think we're both quite honest people, um, and I feel very lucky that he was willing to be on the page as his worst self, just as I am kind of my worst self in the book. Um, but I feel like you don't see people's relationships as whole, like other people's relationships. You see either you hear your friends talking and you hear the worst parts and you don't see the good parts. Or you see on Instagram only the good parts and you don't see any of the bad
And then the
parts.
week later they broke up and you're like, but they
What?
literally just declared their
Yeah,
love to each
what
other
is
on
going
Instagram.
on? And I feel like like I want to be in a relationship where people can see all of the parts, because I don't know, it's an important relationship to me. It's a big part of who I am, and I just don't see the point in trying to pretend that it's something other than what it is. He actually suggested that I move the worst thing that he said to me to the front of the book. So he was very supportive of being a bad guy.
If you asked him to describe PMDD, what do you think he would say?
He would definitely make a joke, and probably a funnier one that I could possibly make right now. But he notices it before I do, so he will like, I don't know, see something radioactive in my eyes or know that it's coming, and I'll be like, no, it's not. Like you actually are being infuriating. Um, and I think there are some, I mean, like he's also human. There are some months where he chooses to be really supportive and be really kind and work through it. There are other months where it's irritating to him that I have this illness as well. And he wishes that we could just be normal, so to speak. Not that there's really any such thing as normal. And there are times, yeah, where he finds it frustrating and we work through it together. But at least understanding that we're not trying to hurt the other person. This is just a situation that is happening.
The book constantly asks the bigger question, and that is, when is a mood just a mood and when does it become an illness? Did writing Periodic Bitch, it's such a great title, leave you with clearer answers?
Left me clearer on the fact that I don't think there is a singular answer to that. I think that we are really good at pathologizing women's real pain. Like if we see an angry woman, we're quick to like say that that's a disorder or that she's crazy or there's something wrong with her. And we're also really quick to dismiss women's complaints. When we do have something wrong with us, so PMDD is like really under-researched, under-recognized, under-diagnosed. Women are saying, I feel crazy, and doctors are saying that's just a normal kind of part of your menstrual cycle, whatever. And I think that there's no one singular answer between what is a mood and what is a disorder, especially with an illness like PMDD that really amplifies what's already at a baseline. So it's not just, I mean, sometimes you'll be depressed and feel grief that seems related to absolutely nothing. But anything that sparks up that might make you a little bit irritated during your regular day will just suddenly be a 10. And so like that dish left out overnight feels like the end of the world. Whereas previously it would just be like oh, you really don't like help me as much as you should. But both of those things are annoying or upsetting. It's just really heightens that mood. So I don't think that there is ever going to be a clear line between what is just a mood and when it becomes a disorder. But I think understanding the book helped me understand how we think about those two things.
I often found that even though I definitely overreacted when those 2 weeks of the month when I was experiencing PMDD and I could recognize that I was overreacting, I also felt that I was speaking a lot of truth. So things
Yeah.
that might annoy me, I would just be very vocal
Yeah.
about them, whereas usually I would just, not say anything, or if something upset me or annoyed me, I wouldn't say anything. But PMDD almost rips off
That
any filter so that you just sort of let it all out, which that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, I guess, when it spirals that it was.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when I think about PMDD as an illness, and I still think that there's so little that we know about it, I think the main reason it becomes an illness is because of the impact that it has on people's lives. And so I think we have to be careful about recognizing that that impact is largely women being really distressed and being in emotional distress and in really vulnerable places. And they're not often like when I'm in that place, it's really hard to advocate for myself, and the systems at large are not advocating for me. So it's a really tricky place to be in. That's when we kind of treat it like an illness and not when we see a woman being angry. That's like maybe that is part of it, but we're not treating it like that because we want to quiet her down. We're treating it like an illness because she is distressed, and she is in pain.
If you're listening to this conversation thinking, oh my God, that's me, please know that you are not alone. PMDD affects millions of women, yet so many of us spend years thinking that we're simply bad at coping, or we're too emotional, too sensitive, or somehow failing at life. We're going to be right back in a moment. In the memoir, you weave together references to horror, hysteria, the yellow wallpaper, Carrie, even rats in PMDD research.
I love the rats.
Which actually, before I ask this question, tell me about the rats.
I kept on reading all of these medical studies about PMDD, and all of them were done on rats in cages. So they're trying these hormones on rats, different medication on rats, seeing their hormone levels, how they respond, how their mood responds. And at the time, I was in lockdown in Melbourne, and instead of understanding the science behind these studies, I was just like, I feel like that rat. Like, of course I'm acting crazy. I'm stuck in a cage. Like, why are we looking at these rats and saying that these rats are insane when they're like stuck in a cage? Of course they're not going to do well on their swimming test. Like, they're depressed. They're stuck. They're
So
trapped. And I don't think that was what I was meant to take away from the studies. But that is where my kind of exploration took me, or where my thinking about illness took me. Like, why do we think the ways that we think about illness? Why do we think the ways that we think about these studies? Why do we expect that the rat is going to do what we as humans want it to do instead of its own rat agenda? And maybe I wanted like a rat agenda for PMDD as well.
So if we think about the rats in an environment that isn't very, doesn't really equate to happiness or good mental well-being,
Yeah.
how do you manage your PMDD in terms of your life? Like, do you make sure you exercise? Is sleep a priority? How do you work with it?
I mean, yeah, we all have, like, I think every human has to do those things. Or like, just like rats have to run to be happy, we have to run and do all those things to be happy. But I also find it incredibly complicated because I think that is so deeply tied, this idea of wellness, and like mental health tied to exercise, to all kinds of self-care, can very quickly for women become codified as a beauty regime or a diet, or connected to weight loss or a certain like aesthetic pursuit. And I strongly do not think that those aesthetic pursuits make us happier. And the PMDD brain can quickly latch on to those things and start to see yourself as like some kind of hideous monster and latch on to these cures in a way of like a special type of tea or exercise or diet, as a way of controlling our bodies as opposed to it actually being curative. So I'm really careful about, like, obviously we're happier when we exercise, but I'm really careful about positing that as the answer.
Because
Um,
often when you've got PMDD, you do not want to go for a walk.
no,
Like you are feeling like
no.
shit, your body's aching,
Yeah,
you're
you're in
not feeling good.
crisis. Like, it's
Yeah.
like telling someone to do yoga when they're in crisis is ridiculous. But
I just always go
yeah,
to bed. I
yeah.
swear my mum has ingrained in me every time I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling 100% or I'm feeling a bit down. She's like, darling, go to bed.
Oh my gosh,
And
and you
now
can
I
sleep.
just go to bed.
Yeah. PMDD will get you to sleep as well. Like, I can sleep a whole day and through the night.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my
it's
God.
exhausting.
It's that's my happy place. Um, Going back to the cultural and literary references, so the yellow wallpaper, Carrie, and we've talked about the rats.
Mm.
Why do those references feel essential?
Well, I felt like being a woman is a kind of horror, and I couldn't differentiate between what was the horrors of PMDD, of feeling like there's some monster that has taken over my body and is going to hurt me or destroy my relationships, whatever, and the horrors of being a woman and being told that you're supposed to be a certain shape, a certain size, speak in certain ways, not be too loud, all of these like little micro, tiny little things that we inflict on ourselves. I just couldn't, they all kind of started to blur together for me. And this illness felt extremely gendered. It felt like we were pathologizing female rage. And so I was looking for examples of female rage in other contexts. Like, who are these angry women? If we're looking at PMDD and I'm feeling really angry, what examples of this can I see? And all of those examples were monsters. I couldn't really find many examples of angry women that weren't coded in some way with the grotesque,
Mm.
which I thought was very interesting. And that's what I wanted to explore as well, is why is our anger so grotesque when it could also be powerful?
And it
Mm.
is so interesting because you do equate PMDD to feeling like a monster throughout your book, and it does feel like that.
I've
It's
heard so many women say that as well. They felt out of control, monstrous, and that they feared what they might do. Those were kind of the three things that I saw over and over again, which I just thought was so. It sounds like a possession, doesn't it?
it does.
And
I
it feels
remember
like that
like
sometimes.
driving in my car and just like screaming to get the rage out, and you feel like you question who you are. I'm like,
Yeah.
what has happened to me? And it did definitely. This is at its peak after I had children, so there's
Great.
so much. Yeah. So yeah, the best is yet to come. That's the really great news. But the happy ending to that story is I'm now in a great place because of
Yeah.
medication.
Yeah, medication.
Medication. I mean, I don't like that I'm on medication. I want to come off medication.
I would love for them to really seriously, them being the medical industry, really seriously look into medications to treat for as treatment for PMDD, because I feel like a lot of the medications that you're on or that I'm on, um, it's kind of like a happy consequence that it works for PMDD, but
Mm.
it's not actually targeting those neurosteroids in the same ways, or it's not. They don't actually necessarily work as well as they could, and they have side effects that and might not be necessary if they put more research into this.
And as I said, I would like to come off, but then I'm
Yeah, it's
scared
not
because
worth
I
it.
don't want to go
Yeah.
back to that cycle of
No.
2 weeks of.
Well, I found that like, so I saw a psychologist who specialized in PMDD, and a lot of the exercises that she did with me were largely around sitting with discomfort, which at the time I had a real reaction to, because I was kind of like, well, aren't we taught to just sit with discomfort, not speak up, all of these things? Um, but I feel like it was a really helpful skill. Because one of the things you might notice with PMDD as well is that you might be righteously angry about something, but you're not in a space where you can articulate it without feeling like you're going to make a fool out of yourself, or you're going to overreact and then you're not going to be taken seriously. You're going to be viewed as hysterical, but you actually have a point, but you can't articulate it in a way that doesn't make you look hysterical.
If you start crying while you're trying to articulate your point, like it's just
It's
a
ridiculous.
mess.
Yeah. And so this sitting with discomfort, I think, gave me more skills to be able to advocate for myself. and still be able to speak up. Yeah, that was really useful. And so I think that even when I'm on a very low dose of medicine, or even when I've come off Prozac because I don't like some of the side effects, that has been really a life-changing skill.
It's actually made me think a lot about emotional regulation, which I should have thought
Yeah.
about earlier in my life, given I'm 44, but it's like, it's so important.
And ADHD and PMDD are very comorbid. They're like partners. I think it's like 30% of
They
people
love each other.
with ADHD. Yeah, I like my psychologist, she described it as being like a vulnerable brain. And I was like, yeah, that's so true.
It's like, great. It's like, anyone else want to come into the party? You mentioned you saw a psychologist, and there is a moment in the memoir where a psychologist responds to your suicidal thoughts by giving you SMART goals, and it feels so corporate and clinical in a moment of such despair. Did experiences like that fundamentally change the way that you see healthcare for women?
Yeah, I think it made me really, and potentially unfairly at times, skeptical of the treatment that I was being given. And I think this is actually a real risk for the medical industry. Is like I believe in medicine. I believe that we should get vaccinated. I believe that science has done amazing things for our world. But if we continue to treat women with this medical misogyny, you're going to get a whole lot of women who don't feel listened to. They don't feel heard. Their very real symptoms and side effects are being ignored, and they're going to stop trusting, rightly so, medical institutions. And so if the medical industry doesn't actually really up its game and start listening to women, treating them, you're going to have a whole bunch of people who completely lose trust in these systems. And I think that's really scary.
And caring. Like, I think I still remember going to see this doctor. This is before I went on antidepressants, and then, so the PMDD was just, I wasn't treating it at all. And I was struggling. I felt like I was struggling to breathe. And I went in to see this doctor. I was like, I can't breathe. And she did all these tests. She's like, you can breathe. And I said, I can't breathe. And she said, you can breathe. I've just done all the tests. You can breathe.
Oh, thanks.
And she's like, clearly you have something mental going on. But she was so dismissive. And I ended up walking out crying.
I'm so sorry that happened.
And I was like, I'm not paying for this appointment. Like, I caused a scene. It was awful. Sat in my car crying because I was feeling, as you would know well, that feeling of being out of control. And I went somewhere for help, having this awful anxiety, this feeling like I couldn't breathe. And the doctor, where I live, there's a special women's health centre. And this beautiful, beautiful doctor. And I went in and I was explaining all my symptoms and talking about PMDD. And she was so gentle. And even though other doctors had advised that I go on medication before, she just did it in the most gentle way. And I just felt like I was being held and listened to, and she cared about me, and she wasn't aggressive. And
Well,
there's
that's
not enough
it.
of that.
How do you, like, a doctor will tell you you're wrong for being hesitant about going on this medication. That's like telling someone you're wrong for being afraid of flying. It's like, that doesn't actually help the problem at all. If you listen to me and you say, why are you hesitant? Okay, I'm hearing you. What we can do are these steps to maybe alleviate that. For example, with Prozac, if you have PMDD, you're likely to know very, very quickly if it's working or not. So the doctor could say to me, we could try it for a week and then come right off it if it doesn't work straight away. We can monitor you, we can take it really slowly, whatever. They could have done that, but instead they would just say, I think you're harming yourself by not going on it. And it's like, I'm not trying to harm myself. I have these real anxieties. You ignoring those anxieties doesn't make them go away. It just makes me skeptical of you.
Now, after the break, Emma and I are going to talk about relationships and rage, why women are so often taught to mistrust their own emotions, and also the surprising ways that she has learned to live with PMDD rather than to fear it. Stay with us. There is a fascinating section about a neuroscientist, Jill Bolt Taylor's theory that emotions psychologically last for 90 seconds, which that really surprised me. I thought that was quite short. And that what prolonged suffering is the story that we build around the feeling into spiraling. So did that idea change the way that you moved through your own spirals?
So now, when I have a relationship conflict and I'm feeling like those PMDD feelings, I'll ask Pavan to not talk to me for 2 minutes. I'll say 2 minutes instead of 90 seconds because he'll be cheeky about it. So one time we were in the car driving, I think we're driving back from Sydney to Melbourne, and I was tired, I was angry, and I was like, I just need 2 minutes to just like let the feeling pass and not like talk about it and like spur it on. And he goes, okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. So look, we're 8 hours and 2 minutes away. When we get to 8 hours, we can start talking again. I'm like, okay, great. And I just feel him start slowly driving the car faster to make those 2 minutes quicker. And I was like, oh, okay, no, that's not the point. But yeah, like sitting with the feeling, acknowledging it, it actually does make a difference. It does really help. I'm a writer. I love a story. I love to like follow the emotion through, try and understand it, try and see where it came from. With PMDD, that doesn't work because sometimes you're not upset about anything. You're feeling immense grief about what? Do you
Oh,
find that
yeah,
as well? Yeah.
absolutely.
It's like your whole body is in this like it feels empty and gaping and like
The number
hollow.
of times I've called my mum and I'm like, but nothing's wrong. Everything's amazing. Why do I feel like this? And I get so
Yeah.
frustrated because I know
It's
how
just
lucky I am and how privileged we all are to have the
yeah.
life that we have. And
Yeah.
I get angry at myself.
Oh, and that anger, I think, was what she is talking about as being that anger is
Mm.
unnecessary. The feeling might be there, but then we add this anger of like, I'm angry that I feel this way. And that is where the spiraling.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that PMDD can destroy relationships, which it
Mm.
absolutely can. Why do you think it hasn't destroyed yours?
Maybe because Pavan is like very forgiving or equally. I think he doesn't really. Emotional outbursts don't bother him. Um, they would bother me a lot more than they bother him. Um, and I think when things are really hard between us or when PMDD was really bad, we would have moments where we would say, okay, let's not talk to each other as lovers or partners or boyfriend, girlfriend or whatever. Let's talk to each other as like best friends. Like, what would you say to me right now as my best friend? And that is helpful because you know that that person is still like we still want the best for each other, which is a helpful way to overcome making it all about the relationship.
How long have
Yeah.
you been together?
We've been together 6 years now. My goodness, in the book, it's described as this person is a rebound.
I know it is. I know.
He's supposed to be. It is not supposed to.
She's
We're
still
not supposed to.
rebounding.
Yeah, yeah. I will be rebounded any day now.
Yeah. Still going. It's an
Yeah, the
extended.
divorce party will be incredible.
An extended rebound. Your memoir is deeply intellectual, but it's also very visceral. Like you talk about crying on runs during Teams meetings. I've done that. Awful. After
There's
kisses.
nothing so humiliating.
It's so. I think as well, just once the tears come and not being able to stop. I mean,
Oh.
I've been in this job almost 3 years, and I think I've only cried. I'm gonna say maybe 2.5 because I'm not going to count the last time, but
It just feels
'cause-
pathetic. I don't know.
yeah, but that's amazing for me. And I started medication pretty soon into starting this job, so that's literally medication helping me to be more emotionally
Yeah.
resilient, helping my moods
Build
to
that
not
buffer,
spiral.
yeah.
Like that's because the crying on Teams, like before when I had no sort of like, I guess, support. Also you talk about feeling itchy in your own skin. Was it important for you to capture PMDD as something physical as well as psychological?
I mean, yeah. Like, I feel like you can't think the feelings away. So I needed to be in the body in the book. The same way I think what I was looking for, and part of the reason I wrote this book was I was looking for like you so generously have described your experiences and like these embarrassing and humiliating experiences of emotional outbursts with PMDD. Before writing this, I couldn't find that. I could hear people saying how they felt, but I couldn't see what anyone had did or what that actually meant for their body. And so it was important for me to try and capture it as honestly as possible, if purely for the act of being honest. Or like this isn't a documentary, but I wanted to document all the aspects of it, and that is a kind of bodily. It's hugely bodily. And I think I'm inspired by all of those women writers who talk about writing the body as well.
Tell me about some of the, like, one or two of the women that you have
Oh,
written about in the book.
that I've written about in the book. Okay. So there are two women who I view as being very connected. One is called Sandy Craddock, and the other is Christine English. And these are two women in the early 80s in the UK who both were found guilty of murder, but had their sentences reduced due to premenstrual illness. And they had the same. I find their cases quite different. So Sandy was walking home from work at a bar with a fellow bartender, and then she stabbed this fellow bartender in a fit of anger, seemingly out of nowhere. And this woman died, and then she was convicted, and later put on medication and served no jail time. And it was because of this premenstrual tension at the time, is what it was called. And the other woman, Christine, pinned her partner between a lamppost and her car. But there was a lot more building up to that conflict. Her partner was an alcoholic. He was abusive. He had spent the day kind of tormenting her and saying that he was going to cheat on her, as well as becoming violent. So they're two quite different cases in my mind for like what the motivations might be. But both of them had this really similar treatment by the legal system. And I was really interested in exploring the ways that we can treat women's anger and what kind of mitigating factors make us look at it differently. And I was also really concerned with the idea of like, well, what am I capable of? So I have this illness. Would I be capable of killing somebody? I would, in many ways, hope that I wouldn't be treated differently by the medical system, or not the medical system, be treated differently by the justice system if I did. But I find these cases really complicated. Uh, yeah, I don't think there is a right answer for how our justice system should treat like a premenstrual defense, so to speak.
It's super complicated.
Yeah, super complicated. And I found there was a lot of nuance in these stories to unpick as well, and to think about the fact that while I was researching them, there's all these legal complications, there's all this debate around, well, did they do it? Is this just letting every woman off the hook? Which is like, this woman is like severely mentally ill and unwell. Or is this like, we're just going to reduce women to their biologies again? Like all of these like debates surrounding it. And nothing from these two women. Like their voices were not on the page at all. Like I spent years trying to find out like what did they actually say? What did they actually feel? Like Christine, I have so much empathy for. I feel like in many ways she was a battered woman. She was a victim survivor of family violence.
She's being tormented.
She's been tormented. And then she does something horrible that she immediately regrets and she feels terrible about. And she is looking for a way to blame herself or to reckon with why she could have done this. In my mind, I feel like a battered woman defense which didn't exist then, would be more relevant to her. Anyway, I could talk about this forever.
It's so interesting. So many women with PMDD are initially misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, for example, depression, or borderline personality disorder. Did finally receiving the correct diagnosis feel liberating or frightening? How did it feel?
I thought it was catastrophic. I mean, to be honest, at the time, it just meant that I was going to keep coming back to that feeling. How did you find it liberating?
No.
No.
I found it like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's not just PMS. I mean, I knew that it was something worse than PMS. It's just,
Yeah.
but it's just like, really?
I mean,
Like,
I'd kind of thought that it could be another kind of mood disorder because it was clearly like the emotions that the emotions that I felt were so big that I thought this had to be some kind of mood disorder. And yeah, when I was thinking about writing this book as well, I was looking at all the past ways that we've categorized these kind of illnesses, like hysteria, like premenstrual tension. There are all sorts of different names that kind of loosely and fit these symptoms.
Yeah.
And we kind of, it feels like we kind of throughout history rearrange these symptoms into different pockets until we get something that works or fits enough people, and then we can start doing research into it, and then we can start funding medication. We can start diagnosing people with it. But I don't think it's a perfect system. And I understand why so many people are misdiagnosed when that is the system that we have.
What is one of the most memorable stories in the book that you share about yourself?
Definitely, I think the fight that Pavan and I had, where I know it starts with him saying nobody would ever love you, no one would put up with this. But it ends, or in this fight, like I feel quite violent. And he becomes aware that I want to hit him, basically. And I think that's a really difficult thing to grapple with, because it is so taboo, and it is so dangerous. These, like, I don't think of myself as a violent person. I don't want to be a violent person. I'm terrified of that impulse. Yeah, that's such a
Yeah, it's
hard
awful.
thing
I
to
don't think of
talk.
myself as someone who would smash a glass in an argument, like literally smash it on the floor, and
Yeah.
then like 2 minutes later come back and clean it up because I'm a neat freak.
Yeah. That's it. Those moments of catharsis. So then you have the actual reality of
Shit, I've
not
gotta
living in
clean
a
it up
movie.
now. Yeah. And that's why it's scary.
It also is scary because I feel like afterwards you don't have a full, like I don't have a full memory of it. Like it feels really intangible, those like PMDD moments, that trying to like document them was also a reminder to myself, and like holding myself accountable to those actions very publicly. Apparently, I've written a book.
It's
Oh.
out there. It's out there. I think though when you write a book, I wrote one in 2022, though, it
Mm.
almost feels like you're writing it just for yourself.
Yeah,
Like
don't think
I
about
still
that.
don't even think about my book being out in the world. It's just sort of like something I wrote privately.
Yeah.
Not, which is kind of nice because you write more openly and more
Yeah.
vulnerably.
Well, like the goal, like this is from a Tobias Wolff letter to Mary Carr, who tells her when she's writing her memoir, like have no spare for you, like do not spare yourself any dignity, like be as petty, as mean, as cruel, as ugly on the page. Like just don't try and flatter yourself in any way. I'm paraphrasing grossly, and that was my goal when I was writing. It was just to be like honest. Um, I just didn't think anyone. I just didn't think about anyone reading it. My family have read it.
My mum told me I swore too much in my book. I'm like, sorry, mum. But it is just freeing, putting it all on a page and being
Yeah.
like, this is who I am. Like, I can't hide from it.
It was also essential. Like, I wanted to write about all the themes that were surrounding PMDD. And it's so dishonest to pretend that that isn't because I experienced it. And I would just be replicating the fact that I couldn't see Sandy Craddock on the page. I couldn't see Christine English on the page. If I were to write this more intellectual book and less bodily book, it would just be dishonest. I'd just be leaving myself off the page. That, yeah. I struggle with, like, is it narcissistic to write about yourself?
You're a writer. Like, we write about our experiences, so it's not. It's like,
Yeah, but also it can be generous.
Yeah.
Like, how else do we see these experiences that are so sidelined unless you're willing to share them? Yeah.
absolutely. And my last question, the name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This.
Mhm.
What's one message, and we'll say in the context of PMDD, that you want our listeners to hear?
The one thing that I'm taking from the PMDD experience is that we should spend a lot less time worrying about how mad or crazy or emotional we are, and a lot more energy trying to be mad and crazy and emotional in the ways that we want to be. So, not suppressing that, but instead channeling it in the direction that means something to us, instead of fearing ourselves.
That's such a great answer. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. I found this conversation incredibly validating and honestly quite emotional. As someone who has lived with PMDD myself, so much of what you've written about resonated deeply, from the rage and the overwhelm to the guilt that often follows. What I love about Periodic Bitch is not just the title, it's that it is not just a book about PMDD. It's a book about womanhood and anger. It's about mental health and relationships and what happens when we finally stop hiding the parts of ourselves we're told are too much. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I highly recommend picking up a copy of Periodic Bitch, a memoir of menstruation, madness and monsters. It's thoughtful and funny, confronting and beautifully written. And if you've loved this episode, please subscribe, leave a review and share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Georgie McCourt and this has been You're Gonna Want to Hear This. I'll see you next week.